Welcome to the 5th Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day event, a path out of genocide, actions for justice and accountability. My name is Wei Wei Nu, a Rohingya human rights and democracy activist and the founder and executive director of Women's Peace Network. As a member of the Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day Committee, entirely led by the leaders and activists from Rohingya community within and outside of Myanmar. It is my immense honor to serve as the host of the event. Marking 5 years since 2017 attacks of genocide, our event today is structured around 4 sessions. Each sessions include 2 panel discussions, will be highlighted by remarks from the esteemed UN and government officials, leaders, and experts from the Rohingya and international community. For your reference, we have shared the agenda in the chat box below. On behalf of the committee, I would like to truly thank all of you for joining us today, as I hope that today also marks a new chapter for our community. This is because 5 years after the clearance operations, when the Burmese military killed, arrested, tortured, raped our community and burned our homes, we have yet to see our justice. The over 1 million forced to flee from the genocide, still seek refuge across the world, and the over 600,000 Rohingya confined in Burma are in a greater danger of facing more atrocities from the military, especially since its attempted coup. The entire community is facing deteriorating condition, risking everything from detention, forced deportation to death in order to survive. We come here today to raise our awareness of our dire situations, but we have not lost hope. Over the past year, the international community has taken greater steps towards achieving our justice. The US government's Rohingya genocide determination, the ICJ case, the Argentina universal jurisdiction case, to the investigations by the International Criminal Court to prosecute the militaries are among the many commendable actions. It is our hope that today will encourage the international community to pursue more actions for our justice and accountability across Myanmar toward restoring the humanity and the dignity of such victims and survivors of genocide. I would like now to proceed with a 1-minute moment of silence for the victims and survivors of the 2017 genocide, as well as across Myanmar today. As you may know, the military that perpetrated the genocide have also committed mass atrocities against other ethnic and religious minorities across Myanmar. And today, the same military is using many of the similar tactics to brutalize the country's entire population. So please join me in remembering all of the victims and survivors for the next 1 minute. Thank you, everyone. Before I invite our speaker, a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's briefing is on the record and will be recorded. We will have a recording and a summary of the event shortly after we wrap. We also have Burmese interpretation, simultaneous interpretation. Please use the interpretation button below to listen to Burmese interpretation. I am honored to begin our event by introducing our first speaker, Mashe Kufara. Mashe Kufara is a mother of three who was forced to flee from Myanmar in 2017, currently residing in the Cox's Bazar refugee camp. As the founder and executive director of Rohingya Women Empowerment and Advocacy Network, she is a leading voice for our community's women seeking refuge in Bangladesh. Sister Shekufa, could you please share with us your experiences as a Rohingya in the camps and what you hope to see to bring justice for your family, loved ones, and the community? The floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for this opportunity, and I am proud to here with you all today. I'm Shekova from refugee camp, Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. Today, Genocide Remembrance Day, 25 August 2022. Today, we Rohingya survivors the mark 5th memorial of what we call Genocide Day. For decades, the Myanmar military systematically conducted operations against our minority Rohingya Muslim population. The clearance operation in 2017 was extremely horrible and made us flee our homeland, Arkan, Myanmar. The world is well known how the Myanmar military committed violence to our Rohingya community, which is called ethnic cleansing and genocide. First of all, we would like to thank to Bangladesh government for hosting us. It has been 5 years now in camp. We are not in a stable position in camps. The situation has gotten worse with illegal activities such as murders and torture. We faced many challenges in these past 5 years as refugees, losing our next generation. Children, futures in the refugee camp is a big issue for us. While we are still in the Bangladesh refugee camp, the authorities should not restrict children's formal education or health care. Approval should be given to patients for medical treatment outside the camp, but instead treat us refugees with respect and dignity. As you know, when it is heavy rain, we can't sleep, dirty water, enter to the shelters. When it is too hot, we can't stay inside the shelters. As shelters are very small with tarpaulin, you know, the most of the camp areas, it is flooded every year. Fire accident happened and sometimes security concerns. Women are affected as victims of trafficking and people are facing difficulties in all the angles. So we are worried to survive continuously in camp. By the way, the people who remain in Arkan state in Myanmar are in an unavoidable predicament. Right now, Myanmar military and Arkan army are fighting in Butidang, Mondo, Retedang township. Very often, Rohingya are targeted and are killed by both parties. Therefore, they are in an extremely difficult condition. Overall, it is totally unsafe there. In due condition, we are worried that possible repatriation may occur. Therefore, we request world leaders, NGOs, UN agencies, and our call for urgent action, urgent step. International pressure must be immediately put on the military government in Myanmar to resolve internal conflict and move forward democracy role that will improve the situation for the Rohingya. We want justice. We want justice and want to return to original home, original places with safety, security, and our citizenship rights. We can never forget 25 August 2017. Let's work together. Thank you so much.
Oh, wait, you unmute.
Thank you very much, Sister Shekufa. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your arcs, and your hope with us. Now, I'd like to invite our distinguished guest, His Excellency Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah of Malaysia. The minister and member of a Malaysian parliament and a vocal advocate for the situations and future of the people of Myanmar has held a distinguished diplomatic career in Malaysia. Excellency, we'll be very grateful if you could enlighten us with your remark with the Malaysians' commitment to Rohingya and Myanmar and what the ASEAN and the international community could do to protect and bring justice and accountability. Over to you, the minister.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Wewinu, and my beloved brothers and sisters. We are gathered today to remember the Rohingya Genocide Day, the brutality of what happened in 2017. We all know that more than 1 million of our brothers and sisters had to flee, had to run for their life. More than 1 million are now living in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar. I had the opportunity to visit them a couple of years back, and I understand perfectly what our sister was saying just now as to the situation in Cox's Bazar, but we must also put on record that we are very thankful to the government of Bangladesh for rendering the kind of assistance I think they have done very much for our brothers and sisters. There are still more than 500,000 or 600,000 of our brothers and sisters still living in dire situation in Myanmar, facing persecution, violence, and so on and so forth. And people who are living as refugees, including in Malaysia, still have, I must admit, some limitation in terms of access to certain areas. And along the way, there are people who have been the victims of trafficking, being asked to stay arrested and stayed in detention centers, and so on and so forth. But we also know that the brutality, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide by the military happened even before 2017. And some of the Myanmar who are already now residing in Malaysia, they came before 2017, some in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Well, for the international community, we must not forget our Rohingya brothers and sisters. And at the same time, we should also look at our brothers and sisters not simply as people who are victims and helpless, but they are like every one of us. They have their own identity, their own culture, they have dignity, they are very resilient people, and they have the right for self-determination just like any one of us. Now, for those who are internally displaced and who are still inside Myanmar, we have to improve the way we deliver humanitarian assistance. And definitely, this is not something that we can do through the junta. I know that there are local-based NGOs who have done quite well, including in distributing vaccination and food and other materials. I have said earlier, and I will be writing in a day or two to the ASEAN Secretary General on the whole, when it comes to humanitarian assistance for the Rohingya and all of our Myanmar brothers and sisters in Myanmar, we really have to rethink how we do it. We have established the special task force, and the junta is involved and in some ways leading the task force, and we know there is no progress. But at the same time, other NGOs, local-based NGOs, and so on and so forth, have been doing a very good job. So ASEAN must really consider, do we continue with the special task force, or do we work with people who are really trusted by the locals? Because I also know that when it comes to international funders, some do not want to work with the junta or anyone that is working with the junta. So we really have to think hard on this one. For some of our brothers and sisters who are living as refugees, we have to try and assist so that we can improve their welfare and their health. In the context of Malaysia, we have about 150,000 or more Rohingya refugees. The number fluctuates from time to time, but about that 150,000. We have to improve in the way we manage the situation in at least two areas. One is on employment. There is now an idea that we need to give them some kind of vocational and technical training so that they have the required skill to be able to work and earn a decent earning by themselves. And number two, on education. This is something that the foreign ministry is, we think it is our responsibility as an agency, not that others are not doing it. We are looking at how can we improve the situation of the alternative learning centers run by the NGOs, and still with the existing learning centers, we can only cater to about 30% of the children. We need to do more so that we can cater to all. We need more funding. We have spoken to some international funders, and we are thankful that Qatar Foundation has donated some $50 million for their health programs, and now we are hoping that we can do more. We can use the funding for education. And one big issue here in Malaysia is to provide accreditation to the children who do well and who wants to further their studies, because there are private universities, not so many, but already there are private universities in Malaysia who are willing to recruit them, but we need to give them some kind of accreditation. And this, we are talking to the Ministry of Education, and hopefully we can do this, and hence, and after that, of course, there are other areas like teacher training and so on, but these are some of the things that we are looking at. But we have to solve the root cause of all of this. And the root cause is exactly what have been said by many. It is the military, now the junta, who staged the coup in 2021. The ASEAN leaders have come up with a 5-point consensus, but unfortunately, there don't seem to be real progress. Even though my colleagues, the two foreign ministers, the former special envoy and the current special envoy of the chair of ASEAN, I think they have done their level best, but there is no real progress, and that is why in the recent foreign ministers meeting, Malaysia has proposed a framework that has a clear end game. And the end game is to return to democracy, to return to peace, harmony, and prosperity, and where freedom of the people is guaranteed by the Constitution. And by the Constitution, as I understand it, is not the current Constitution. I think the people of Myanmar, including Rohingyas, want a new Constitution, which to the Rohingya, one of your major fundamental rights, which is now not accorded to by the current Constitution and the other laws, is about citizenship, a very basic right of any individual in any sovereign state. And the ASEAN summit, and the end game has to go through an inclusive consultation of all the major stakeholders, including the NUG and the NUCC, which I have met openly. And I also understand the Rohingya community is looking for a better level of participation within the NUCC. And then there should be some kind of transition plan before you can have a real free election that is agreed by all, not the election that is announced by the junta. And then hopefully we will see the return of democracy, peace, harmony, and prosperity. So the ASEAN summit in November will have to ask the hard question and make big decisions. Do we continue with the 5-point consensus? To what extent are we helping the refugees, the Rohingya in particular, and so on and so forth. And before I end, we must not forget that the military cannot go away with the kind of impunity that they are enjoying today. So Malaysia supports the work of the Gambian team at the ICJ, and also the case in Argentina, and of course, and closer to home, the works of the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar. So we in Malaysia, we will stand in support and in solidarity with our brothers and sisters Rohingya and all the peace-loving and democracy-loving people of Myanmar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, Mr. Saifuddin Abdullah, for actually sharing this very insightful remark and thoughtful remark with us. We appreciate, and our community is so grateful to the Malaysia for hosting many of our people in your country and caring for our people. And for you, I'm also very, very grateful that you highlighted not to see Rohingya as victims, but to see any one of just like any other people, and also sharing reassuring your commitment within Malaysia, and sharing your thoughts on ASEAN and highlighting the need to ask hard questions in the ASEAN summit to address the Burma-Myanmar issue collectively. More importantly, you highlighted the need for inclusive futures in Myanmar and the need for the inclusions of Rohingya in Myanmar. And we truly appreciate your thoughts and your remark and all the work that you do. And thank you for joining us today. Now, as we wait for Councillor Shule, I would like to actually bring the Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, his pre-recorded remark. Today, a number of government has made an announcement that include the UK, and the UK has announced that they're going to extend the sanctions against the militaries and its businesses directly linked to the 2017 clearance operations, as well as their confirmations to intervene the ICJ genocide case. So let's hear from the minister on what the UK is planning to commit to Rohingya further. So just to provide you a short background of the Lord Ahmed is the Minister of South and Central North Africa and United Nations and the Commonwealth at the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO. He was the first appointed as a Prime Minister's Special Representative on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict and as a Minister of the State for Commonwealth and the United Nations on 13 June 17. Allow me to share the screen. There you go. And
to take this opportunity to thank you for the chance to join you on behalf of distinguished guests. 5 years on from the devastating attacks against the Rohingya community in Myanmar, I wish to take this opportunity to thank you for the chance to join you on behalf of my government, the British government, to remember all those who have tragically lost their homes, and more tragically, all those who have lost their lives in the ongoing violence in Myanmar and the ethnic cleansing that has taken place. The United Kingdom remains firm and committed to supporting the Rohingya community on both sides of the border to ensure a safe, dignified and voluntary return, and to ending the culture of impunity within the Myanmar armed forces. Close to 1 million Rohingya refugees now live in Bangladesh. And as with refugees around the world, they have shown resilience and incredible courage. We remain incredibly grateful also to the government of Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh, for their generous support they have shown in hosting the Rohingya community. Since 2017, the United Kingdom has provided £330 million of support to the Rohingya community and neighbouring communities in Bangladesh. We have also given £25 million of aid directly to support those of the Rohingya community remaining in Rakhine State in Myanmar. Our support has included urgent food, water, shelter, and sanitation assistance. And also, we've sought to create open and safe spaces, particularly for women and girls. And let me assure you of this, that the United Kingdom will continue to support the Rohingya community in Bangladesh until they can finally return home. On this 5th anniversary, we also continue to press and coordinate with the international community to work together to improve the conditions for the Rohingya community and mitigate the risk of further atrocities taking place in Myanmar. And that is why the United Kingdom has announced a further round of sanctions to target directly those businesses who funded the clearance operations back in 2017 and are also linked directly to the Myanmar military. For us, justice and accountability, like everyone participating, is also vital. And that's why I'm pleased that the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has announced our intention now to intervene in the International Court of Justice case between the Gambia and Myanmar. steadfast and continue to
sorry.
work with our key international partners,
Sorry, I mistakenly muted.
keeping the spotlight on this crisis. True justice for the Rohingya community will involve meaningful accountability and justice for the victims, for the incredible, courageous survivors, the restoration of their citizenship, their recognition in Myanmar, and a final end to the systematic human rights violations they have suffered for decades. This must come to an end. The United Kingdom will remain steadfast and continue to work with our key international partners to put further pressure on the Myanmar armed forces to halt their human rights violations and to hold them accountable for their actions, particularly against the Rohingya community. We will do all we can to support Rohingya communities across the world to ensure that we secure peace and stability, and we will also push for their genuine inclusion within the pro-democracy movement. Today, I want to once again reaffirm and reassure everyone that the United Kingdom's commitment to keep the international spotlight on this crisis remains steadfast. And together with everyone else, we will continue to work to this objective until the Rohingya community can finally safely return home, and also in ensuring that all people within Myanmar, all its diverse communities, can come together. For strength of a nation is its in diversity, yes, but also how a country comes together so that all citizens of Myanmar can enjoy peace, can enjoy justice, and ultimately see progress and prosperity, which they all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Ahmed. We are very, very thankful for the UK for making a special announcement today for the victims and survivors of genocide. According to the agenda, we have one speaker left for the introductory program, sections of the program. We are still waiting for the councillor Shirley join. And before that, I would like to actually thank the individuals, organizations, institutions, governments, and policymakers who has supported Rohingya for the past several years and decades, and who have been standing with us to achieve justice and dignity back home in Myanmar. And today there are many individuals and organizations reach out to us to show their support and their love and their solidarity with us. And also it includes Senator Jeff Merkley of the United States. I would like to show you a statement from the senator, and just to appreciate his written remark to us. Allow me to share the screen of the senator. We are very, very thankful to the Senator Merkley for his written remark to us and reassuring his support and commitment to our people and to end genocide in Burma. I would like to just reiterate by reading his remark, the last paragraph of his remark. I quote, "The international community must never stay silent in the face of grave human rights abuses. And we must make it undeniably clear that when a government systematically prosecutes its people and rob them of their basics, right, there will be consequences. Quote. As we wait for the Councillor Shirley, I apologize for the technical difficulties and misunderstanding. Councillor has been having a hard time to join us. So now I would like to move on to our first panel discussions on strengthening international responses to the genocide. For this panel, I would like to invite Mr. Daniel Sullivan to lead the discussions. Daniel is the Deputy Director of the Refugee International and has been a long supporter of the Rohingya and has worked so much on ending genocide and atrocity crimes across the world. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Weiwei, and thank you to all the organizers of this this important event. As Weiwei mentioned, I'm Dan Sullivan. I am with Refugees International. I've spent the better part of my career on Rohingya advocacy, and you know, just I'm honored to be part of this this panel with so many esteemed speakers. In the interest of time, I'll keep my introductory remarks brief and turn to our great panel. I just want to, on behalf of Refugees International, express our solidarity and also our recommitment to the theme of this panel, which is strengthening international responses to genocide. We have four experts that are joining us as panelists. Again, in the interest of time, I will just be very brief about introducing them before they speak. They each have very impressive resumes, which you can check out offline. Again, but for the interest of time, we'll just turn to each one to speak about the theme of this panel. And I would also like to just point out to everyone, if you have any questions, you can click on the bottom of the screen. You should see a Q&A function, and we'll collect a round of questions after each of the speakers speak and give them a chance to answer those. So to just set the stage, when we're looking at strengthening international responses to genocide, we've seen some fairly significant actions taken over the past 5 years in terms of what's happened with the International Court of Justice, with several targeted sanctions, and with humanitarian support. And today we've heard the announcement of some new measures that will be very welcome. However, the reality for most Rohingya is that they continue to suffer the consequences of the genocide. And clearly there's much more that can and must be done. So with that, I'd like to turn to the speakers to each reflect on where we are today and what are the kinds of measures that can be taken to improve things and improve the international response to the genocide going forward. With that, I will turn to our first speaker, Ambassador Bob Rae. He is the permanent representative of Canada to the United Nations and a former special envoy to Myanmar, and has an illustrious political career in addition to that. So Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you so much to Weiwei Nu and to all the organizers of this meeting. I think it's exceptionally important that we take the opportunity, take the time to commemorate this date, to reflect on its significance, and to continue with deepening our actions that we need to take. I'm glad that Dan asked me to very briefly reflect a bit on how far we've come. And I, having visited the camp for the first time in October of 2017, and wrote a report that came out in in the spring of 2018.
Thinking we should record for some.
I think we can have to say that we've actually made a remarkable amount of progress. First of all, in naming the genocide. That took a bit of time, but we did it. And there's now, I think, a really clear understanding globally about not only what has taken place in the last 5 years, but what has taken place within the context of the history of Burma. And this, I think, is exceptionally important as an event, that the issue of genocide is no longer contested, except by a few frankly marginal groups. It's something that's widely accepted as being at the foundation of what has taken place. And even more, the fact that the genocide is not simply confined to the Rohingya population, but actually goes well beyond to many other groups in Burma itself. The second is we've been able to focus global attention on two things. One is improving conditions for refugees, both in Bangladesh, in other communities, other countries, and also in Rakhine State. It's been very difficult. And I want to echo very much what Shakufa said, because I think her comments coming from the camp were very, very important. We must never lose sight of the fact that a humanitarian crisis cannot be allowed to create an educational crisis, a crisis in safety, a crisis in morale, a mental health crisis. We have to deal with the nature of the living conditions and the working conditions and the opportunities for people to live lives in dignity, because the issue of return is so difficult, because the circumstances that would lead to return are not entirely in our control. There's so many ways in which this is now proving so difficult because of the conflict in Myanmar itself. The other thing I did in my report was call for much more international coordination. I think we're seeing that, actually. The recent announcement by the UK, they're going to join the Netherlands and Canada in supporting Gambia at the ICJ. I think that's important. The fact that we've all come together to support the IIIM, that's important. The fact that we have other cases that are underway on accountability and we're working together is good. It's a positive sign. But we can't stop. We have to continue to improve the level of coordination, the work we do together. And what my friend Tom Andrews, I know, will refer to, because he and I have talked about this a lot, how do we improve the international coordination on the sanctions? And how do we make sure that we're doing more to get to a better place? I'm glad that Minister Abdullah mentioned the issue of ASEAN and how we have to go forward. I have to say that Canada is disappointed we all agreed. We agreed here at the UN after some considerable debate and discussion that we would let ASEAN lead in the regional response to the crisis. And I have to say that I'm disappointed that we've not been able to make more progress. And as Minister Abdullah has said, there will have to be a real discussion about what the next steps are, both regionally and at the United Nations, to push forward. Ultimately, I think we all agree on what we want. We want to see a safe return for the Rohingya, but a safe return in a way that allows them to be included in the political community of Burma, and which allows their political rights and their other human rights to be fully recognized and fully accepted by everyone in the country. It's not just about going back and finding a place to live. It's about going back in dignity and with dignity recognized in a new constitution. That's critical. And I think we all realize that achieving that goal is going to be difficult. The Tatmadaw is a brutal enemy. It is running a criminal enterprise in the country, and it's creating terrible conditions now, not just for the Rohingya, but for people all across the country. And so we have to continue to name that, to recognize that that is the chief blockage to where we need to get to, and that we have to do everything we can to create the space for political change in Myanmar, political change that will be thorough, deep, and will include a dignified return to human rights and to political rights for the Rohingya people. Canada is very committed to this. We have renewed our 5-year plan, original 5-year plan. We've renewed it at the same level of financial support, which is $300 million over the next 5-year period. That's a substantial aid package from Canada in terms of all the other humanitarian crises to which we're having to respond. And we will be announcing shortly the name of a new special envoy who will help us to coordinate these efforts and to keep us going on a good track. We continue to focus on this issue and pay a great deal of attention to it, working with our partners in Bangladesh. I'm very glad that my colleague from Bangladesh is on the panel. It's very good to join with him, and it's good to be with all of you on this day. It's a solemn day, but it's also a day where we just need to keep at it and renew our common determination. I think we've identified the things we need to do together. I think we're actually doing them better than we did 5 years ago, but we haven't seen the results on the ground that we need to see, and we have to keep everybody's hopes based on the realities of the things we need to do together. But I don't want anyone to feel that their situation is somehow being forgotten or marginalized in global discussions. That's certainly not the case for Canada, and we're doing everything we can to bring this issue to the center of all of our work. Thank you so much. It's good to see you and good to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Appreciate those remarks. I'm going to move it on right away to our next speaker, the Honorable Tom Andrews, who is a former U.S. member of Congress and the current UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Myanmar. I'd also mention that I had the great fortune of working for Tom when he was the president of the United to End Genocide, and so eager to hear his remarks. Tom, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Weiwei, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel. Thanks for organizing this event. And thanks to you and the hard work that you and your organization and the network of advocacy organizations of Rohingya and on behalf of the Rohingya community are doing. You don't receive enough credit. You don't receive enough support. And I think one of the ways that the international community can strengthen its role with respect to addressing this genocide is to provide a much greater level of support to those who are on the front lines of this and related crises in Myanmar. The fact of the matter is that the international community, in my view, can begin to strengthen its response to this genocide by calling it what it is, a genocide. I was very happy to hear that the UK is moving towards supporting the ICJ action brought by the Gambia, a very important step forward. I encourage others to take similar action, as well as the imposition of stronger sanctions announced today. Again, very welcome development. But I encourage this to be done by not only others, but to be done in a strategic and coordinated way, that all of these various sanctions regimes, including an arms embargo, can be focused, can be targeted, can be coordinated, and then zeroed in on those areas in which the junta is most vulnerable. This is how we can strengthen our role as an international community in providing support to those who are remain under siege in the Rohingya community and other communities in Myanmar. I also want to make it very clear that this tragedy, these assaults, this violence, this bigotry is not just something that began in August of 2017. I remember traveling to Myanmar, traveling in Rakhine State, being in Sidway, going to what the so-called IDP camps, which are really open air prisons or concentration type camps, housing people in deplorable conditions. They have been there now for over 10 years. 130,000 or more are there right now as we speak. And I remember so vividly having a man tell me as I visited the camp and was looking at these conditions years ago, he said, if the international community cannot stop this suffering of all of us here at these camps, then please bomb the camps, because it would be better for me and my family to have these camps destroyed and for us to die than to continue to live in these incredible conditions. I also remember traveling in Rakhine State and visiting people who needed basic health care, members of the Rohingya community in need of basic health care. Simple antibiotics, for example, that would keep them, make them well. And having the government of Myanmar deny that basic health care to those Rohingya people in need. And then returning to Myanmar only to learn in meeting with their families that these people who were in need of just basic health care had perished because they were denied the basic right to survive. This is all part of a genocidal pattern that has existed for years. The genocide that we commemorate today of 2017 was designed, was planned, and was executed in a way that is just completely outrageous and obvious as to what the intent of those who were responsible for this had. Make no mistake, the man who leads the military junta of Myanmar, Min Aung Hlaing, conducted, organized, and oversaw the genocidal attacks of 2017. And so it's for this reason that the international community must do a much greater, to play a much heavier, stronger, more purposeful and focused role in bringing the pressure, diplomatic, economic pressure to bear on making this nightmare end for millions and millions of people throughout Myanmar. So in closing, I again thank you for the opportunity to be here to join you. Thank you for the courage and the tenacity of those who are on the front lines of this struggle. And please know that you have a friend and ally in myself. I so appreciate the information and analysis and recommendations that you have provided to me. And I encourage you to continue to do so. My door is open. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Special Rapporteur Andrews. And just a quick reminder that if you want to ask questions of the panelists, you can click on the Q&A button that should be at the bottom of your screen. Our next speaker is Mr. Mansoor Hassan, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Peace and Justice at BRAC University. He's also a former Deputy Executive Director at BRAC, which is the largest NGO in the world. Mr. Mansoor Hassan, on to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Buevenu, thank you for inviting me to this very important meeting, and I'm delighted to be here. Let me first remember the day, the victims of 25th of August 2017. And I actually was in Cox's Bazar when people started coming in, the refugees started coming in, and I saw the terrible suffering of the Rohingya brothers and sisters as they were coming in. I was there on a private visit, but when I came back to Dhaka after that visit, I actually sat down with some colleagues and really started to examine what was the reason behind it and started a program at the Center for Peace and Justice to look at the issues. And I've put the link of the website where you will find some of the research that we have done looking at the underlying causes and the issues which resulted in this massive influx of 1 million people coming into Bangladesh. Let me also say at the very beginning that when I was there, when I saw people coming in, there was a very spontaneous kind of reaction from the host community. They came and they actually opened their doors. They gave shelter to the refugees. And also we saw a tremendous partnership that developed between the people and the organizations, and also the government of Bangladesh stepped in and provided all the support that was needed. That was actually an outstanding kind of a step that was taken, a kind of people coming together and working on this particular issue. But we also see there is a political issue that is missing. If we examine what has happened over the last 5 years, we see that international policy decisions have often been affected by a lack of political will. This has been amply evident since August 2017 vis-a-vis the Rohingya situation. This lack of political will has created a stalemate in the international community, I believe, not allowing most major actors to take significant steps against the perpetrators. The International Court of Justice decisions so far have been significant, but they are not binding. And despite the fact that the ICC, the International Criminal Court investigation has started, it will take some time for the prosecution proceedings to start. So we need to reconsider the existing principles, some of the principles that our other panelists have talked about. For example, the responsibility to protect, as it stands, has proven to be ineffective. However, a rethinking of the R2P principle to incorporate support to host communities and non-military interventions, including targeted economic and political sanctions to persons and corporations, could prove to be more effective in putting the pressure on non-compliant states to come to the negotiating table. All institutions, I believe, need to put in a concerted and consistent effort in engaging the victims of this atrocity at various levels. Ambassador Bobre has referred to this. This could take many forms depending on where individuals or institutions can contribute. At my own institute, the Center for Peace and Justice, we engage a lot in participatory action research, whereby our target community actively become a formative part of the research that we do, thus making the work we do truly representative of their needs. Representation of their needs and demands, the victims' needs and demand, and representation of their narratives at multiple levels of accountability and policy structures will contribute to a shift in the narrative over time as more and more opinion begins to change until a critical mass is reached and the political will is shifted, thereby moving the cogs of the international mechanism in the right direction. Until then, engagement must continue, and representation of the Rohingya voice must be a key component. This is the only way in which we can respond to genocide or similar atrocities in the absence of existing political will. Just in my final sort of comments, I would say that we see this situation in Bangladesh too. The narrative that we see, the dominant narrative sometimes we see in Bangladesh is kind of anti-Rohingya. And that has to change. And it is changing. I have been attending a number of meetings over the last couple of days, and I find people are thinking differently. There was a time when in Cox's Bazar itself, there was a strong anti-Rohingya sentiment. But yesterday I was attending a meeting, I attended a meeting where I spoke to a number of local people from Cox's Bazar, and they also feel that there has to be a concerted effort to improve the lot of the Rohingya refugees in the camps itself, particularly the youth that we find are pretty much idle and becoming frustrated with the present situation. So I think this is very important for all of us. We have to work on the narrative. We have to gather evidence and put that evidence together and put them in the public domain so that over a period of time, the public opinion can shift and the right policy decisions can be taken. So I thank you, Wewenu, for this opportunity and hope to contribute later. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, and thanks for emphasizing in your work on making sure that the Rohingya refugees themselves are included and centered in these responses. One more reminder, if you have any questions, to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and submit them. I've also received some offline. But first, let's hear from Yasmin Ullah. Yasmin is a Rohingya feminist author, poet, and social justice activist born in northern Rakhine State in Myanmar before fleeing to Thailand as a child, then moving to Canada in 2011. She's been a great outspoken voice on all things Rohingya and have welcomed the opportunity to collaborate with her in the past. So Yasmin, over to you.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a privilege to be here and attend today's commemoration. While I'm acutely aware and cognizant of those in our community that we've lost, and those whose fate is still undecided in various settlements around the world. For my community, I hope and pray that there is nothing but love, blessing, and prosperity that comes their ways, that we would one day be able to live in the reality of what could have been had a genocide not taken place. I would like to first begin by acknowledging that I speak to you all today from an unceded traditional territories of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Musqueam, Kakade, Tsleil-Waututh, Tsawwassen First Nations, and other Coast Salish people. Unceded means that the lands were never given up or surrendered, and thus I and others are operating on stolen lands. On this topic of strengthening international responses to the genocide, I need to preface by saying that what I'm going to say with a little bit of, basically I need to say that there needs to be a reality check. My community is never ungrateful. We're very grateful for the help that we've gotten, for the kindness, and for various different help that we've gotten over the past few years. We will not forget those who stood by us. But whenever a critical view is expanded or talked about in this situation, we're often branded as ungrateful, which is the first point that I want to make. If a bare minimum of basic needs being met is seen as too demanding by the international community and various state response, then we have a bigger problem to worry about. My community being ungrateful will be the least of that problem. I hope that we can make a distinction between gratitude and the need to survive. A community can very well survive under the most wretched of circumstances, but they cannot thrive. This is what the Myanmar military wants, for us to perish as the poorest, most neglected and isolated group of people. If the international community and states with Rohingya asylum seekers or refugees respond in the same restrictive manners to how the Myanmar military has implemented its isolation, restriction, and systemic oppressive violence against us, are we all that different from the perpetrators? Secondly, whenever we emphasize the idea of Rohingya-centric approach, it is only well received superficially. This includes exclusions in most political, economic, and civic spaces, both internationally and within Myanmar. So in reality, this victim-centric approach is not implemented. And this goes directly to those engaging, involving, and advocating for our community. If your approach to help does not include a Rohingya consultation, it is not helpful no matter how transformative such initiatives may be. If the consultation is done at the very end to ask Rohingya to approve the plan you came up with, it isn't a consultation. I know my community well enough to know that this is all new to us, and things can get really complicated with generations having no access to education in or out of Myanmar. But here's the thing, we did not create this problem for ourselves. There are always a way. The perpetrators are to this day being enabled by various states around the world who could not put aside economic interest over saving lives. It may sound controversial to say this, but please know that my community are the farthest from being entitled. But we are owed the help, protection, and redress to the mass atrocity spanning decades. The international community actually owes us the resolution that centers our agency. It is responsible for the international community to ask us how it could help us start over. This brings me to my last point, which is no people in the world have ever been able to come out of a genocide or other mass atrocities without help, and that help need to be holistically viewed, reevaluated, and carefully implemented. I say this with the utmost respect for those who have worked tirelessly to help our community, that a lot of the approaches are dismissive and disempowering. Our community did not survive a genocide and its continuation within Rakhine State as a fluke. You know how people actually crossed the river in Bangladesh, to Bangladesh, my apologies, in 2017. They built makeshift rafts and fled the violence. Many of them carried solar panel across the river because that was the only way they could actually stay connected with their families left behind in Rakhine State or those outside of Myanmar. Many of them are crafty and they innovate while adapting through restrictions one after another. This is who we are. And to not utilize our skills we harnessed over the past decades to further uplift our community in displacement is such a missed opportunity. The plans shouldn't just be traditional humanitarianism, where our people have no say in how decisions are made. And borrowing from the sociologist Robert Merton to drive home this last point, he put it very well that societal pressure under its structures can lead to 5 modes of adaptation, one of which is innovation, which can sometimes be seen as deviant behaviors. We see a lot of violence that are now quite widespread all over the camps, especially towards women and girls. This is without any mistakes coming from the societal pressure and from the lack of human security. It is the increased restrictions, lack of food and water, lack of prospect in life, no educational access, and so much more that would drive people over the edge, and chaos ensues. Humans need very little to survive, but we need more to be able to thrive. The restrictions and intolerable conditions will not help Rohingya repatriate faster or hold perpetrators accountable in full force. In that process, preparing for Rohingya to be able to go back home with their existing skills added to and expanded would be the only sustainable way to repatriate, given the conditions are safe and dignified. Allowing Rohingya to use our skills, to exercise our agency, and let us work to sustain the families and community. Let us not internalize the idea of helplessness so that we could actually return home as contributing members of the society with economic agency. This is an important missing piece that I often see. It is incumbent upon the international community to ensure that Rohingya are able to express, critique, and change ineffective decisions involving us, because conditions that lead to human security will lessen turmoil that we are in. We do not want to be refugees. We want to be back in Arakan. But we will not be able to go back home nor flourish as a people contributing to the global society at large without being supported, heard, seen, and cared for in the ways that respect us. We don't stop being respectable humans just because we are in need of help. Help that is needed because the collective complacency took place. So the vital step towards strengthening international response to the genocide is that listening to Rohingya involved more than just sitting down to use our stories for more donations or our pictures. It involves trusting and believing that as unskilled as you see us, or as uneducated as we may be, we know how to survive. We know our community. We know how the issues can be addressed and handled. Help us help ourselves. And plan for the inevitable. We may be stuck in places like Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, and others for another decade or longer. So let us use our skills, things that we have perfected like farming for decades, to produce food to address issues like food insecurity and shortage in the camps. We don't ask to be working anywhere else. Exercise of agency such as this can go a long way to help us feel seen and cared for. Dwindling funds by the international community will keep lessening. This is one way to center Rohingya in the initiatives to further stabilize the community and expand our skills. Please know that we are more than capable of helping ourselves. It is up to those who work on our cause to help us in the ways that is uplifting, empowering, and sustainable, because genocide survival itself is a skill. International responses need to go beyond keeping us alive, even if it's misery that we face every day, but go deeper into our psyche and our abilities as humans. Only when we can situate ourselves as far more than helpless refugees would we have the negotiating power to ensure our social positionality is not at a disadvantage in Myanmar. This includes the international community not excluding us from all its Myanmar's work. It seems simple that the solution to the historical exclusion of minoritized groups is to include them, but it seems so much harder when Rohingya demands their rightful places in these discussions. Please do not make the mistake and think that NUG's progressive language is actually progress. Unless Rohingya actually can represent themselves at the government level with no strings attached or further verification process required, a genocide did not occur out of thin air. We're far, far away from where we would want to, we would have wanted to be. But here is an opportunity. It's also an opportunity for the international community to do the right thing and create precedents that is rarely seen. Only then would our community be able to thrive once again. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Yasmin, for that incredibly powerful statement. We're going to do a lightning round of questions. I'll just select 3 or 4, and then we'll go in the order of the panelists. You can choose which of those you want to answer, and I would just ask that you be very, very brief as we're running a bit low on time. The first question is directed to Yasmin, but anyone can answer. What is your top call to action for international policymakers listening in, particularly for improving the situation for Rohingya women and girls? What urgent actions and interventions would make the most immediate difference? The second question is, why is the Rohingya community not getting the same attention as the Ukrainians are getting from the West? Why is Ukraine getting $8 billion in aid from the US and the Rohingyas are getting only $3 million? Why is Russia getting tougher sanctions than Burma? A third question, from the daily life in refugee camps to UN memorandums of understanding and international discussions about the future of Myanmar, we've seen Rohingya too often sidelined. How can the international community do a better job of ensuring that Rohingya voices are included in decisions about their future? And then a final question, I'll try to end on a bit of a more positive note. What makes you most hopeful about the next 5 years and beyond, to each of our speakers? So I'll turn first to Ambassador Babre. And again, please, asking the speakers to be very brief in your answers. Thank you. I'm not sure if Ambassador Babre is still connected. So why don't we move to Special Rapporteur Andrews?
Thank you, Dan. And very, very briefly, what gives me hope is also what I think is the key moving forward, and that is the engagement with enfranchisement of the Rohingya community, those who know more than anyone else of the challenges and the needs, and whose voices, more than any other voices, need to be heard in designing and laying out the future moving forward. So that's what their tenacity and courage gives me great hope. And I think that also, therein lies the key. The foreign minister was right on target when he said it was important for us as an international community to do a fundamental rethink. I think we have to stop, take a deep breath, and look at what it is that we're not doing that we need to be doing. And I think some of those answers are very, very clear. And again, reiterating my call for coordinated, focused, targeted, strategic action in which the various parts of the international community can all add up together and link to those areas that are most promising or would be most promising to see this nightmare end, and to do so in a very collaborative way with those who are on the front lines of this crisis. And finally, let's learn the lesson. This junta has never been held accountable. So if you're not held accountable for a genocide, what do? You attempt an illegal coup, and you take an entire nation of 54 million people hostage. You become this criminal gang that Ambassador Ray referred to. Accountability is missing, and accountability is key. And I hope that this international community, all of us, can rethink what we're doing and fundamentally reset our path forward, making accountability and coordinated action a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Hassan?
Thank you, Dan. I mean, to start off with, I will say that, when it comes to refugees and humanitarian crisis, it's not a level playing field. I mean, whether we talk about Ukraine or Myanmar, I mean, there is hypocrisy here involved. I mean, and I think we just have to call spade a spade, and that is what's happening. And I think, you know, we can only highlight this hypocrisy if we can actually put enough evidence on the table in the public domain and show that, you know, suffering is suffering. I mean, you cannot differentiate. And I think there has to be recognition of that fact. And I think as Yasmin said so eloquently, I think the voice of Rohingya has to come to the fore. I think that is very, very important. And I think we cannot speak on their behalf. They have to speak for themselves. And I think this is not, it's not happening, but I think we are getting there. There's a lot more work needs to be done. In terms of giving me hope, I would say the ICJ decision that, you know, the Rohingya, they have mentioned the word Rohingya, they've used the word Rohingya, it is recognized, it's a community. The Myanmar government may not recognize the name or the community or the ethnic group, but it has been recognized internationally, legally. And I think that's a hopeful decision. I feel it's important that we should recognize that. The fact that UK has also joined, I think that's also hopeful. It was a very positive decision. So I would say that finally, you know, in order to change the narrative, we need to work at the grassroots level and really give hope to the young people who are in the camps and also in the host community. I think it's happening, but there has to be much more focus on this, and there has to be much more investment that goes in. And we see political will or lack of political will as a static issue, but it isn't. Things can change, and this is the major challenge that we are facing. How do we change that political will at different levels and make it work for the affected communities, the marginalized communities that we are referring to, that we are talking about? So I'm hopeful in the sense that it is changing and it will change further in the future, but we need to kind of keep at it and not forget the central element, which is the voice of Rohingya. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Yasmin, on to you.
Thank you very much for those questions. I think that I will reiterate what I've just said in regards to the questions about women and girls. A lot of the problems that are currently widespread within the camps and elsewhere in terms of settlement of Rohingya are often involving human insecurity issues, lack of access to education and opportunity to work, and creating more for ourselves. I'm sorry, my cat's making an appearance right now. And my community's capable of actually take that work and ensure that we flourish as a community, but we need more support in terms of, as Mansoor has talked about, it is important that young people and those that are in the camps not feel isolated and not feel idle in terms of their existence inside the camps and their existence as refugees. There needs to be something that we can do in order to almost distract ourselves from the plight that we're currently enduring. And those will actually lessen the issues that we consider deviance in sociological terms, and really lessen the crimes that are committed or the widespread of violence against women and girls. There are definitely more work that needs to be done on the ground with women and girls, specifically on bettering the livelihood and the safety issues. And that can be a separate conversation that we can have. It requires a lot more discussion. But to move on to another questions that was asked, my community gives me the most hope. And they have the fact that they have survived this long, the fact that they are still kind, are still gentle, are still, wonderful group of people, says everything that I probably cannot say. A lot of the connections that I've been able to make over the past year or so with my Myanmar counterparts, ethnic communities, really gives me hope that the future of Myanmar, a federalized one, with ethnic communities being respected, is a possibility, but there is definitely a lot of work that needed to be done. And there's also an understanding that we are trying to ensure along with this work. Another part that I think is important and really, really vital to mention is that there are a lot of stories that are told about our culture. And an important part, apart from the recognition of our names and who we are, is who we have been as a culture. And fortunately, I have had a lot of opportunities to work on it through poetry, through writing children's book, through many various occasions. And the same is being done by so many other activists and so many other advocates for our community. So they really keep me going in terms of this work. And really, like what Special Rapporteur Andrew said, it needs to be a collaborative work in order for this misery to end for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yasmin, and thanks to all of the panelists, and again to the organizers for this great discussion. With that, I'll turn it back over to Wei Wei. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan, for moderating these sessions, and thank you very much for your excellent moderation. Thank you to our speakers for sharing very insightful comments and thoughts with us on how to strengthen international responses, highlighting the agencies of the community as a way to justice and sustainable solutions, as well as collective and comprehensive responses, and understanding some of the narratives on the ground. And we appreciate your thoughts and contributions in this panel. Now, I would like to turn to our brother Kemal. Our brother Kemal is a founder and executive director of Rohingya Youth Association in Cox's Bazar refugee camps. He works on youth empowerment, peace, education, and human rights advocacy. He has tirelessly advocated on behalf of the Rohingya community on the global audience through various channels, including media interviews. The floor is yours, Kemal.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for your support and solidarity on the Rohingya issue. Today, we remember and honor all those Rohingya men, women, and children who have been killed as a result of genocide, violence perpetrated led by the Myanmar military with the support of civil government. As you know, we have no future, no hope, no free movement, and no education, no formal education. We need international support to improve the life and livelihood in the refugee camp. Although the whole international community has said that the military has committed genocide, but the military is still free from the crime committed without responsibility. International community always saying that Rohingya will never be forgotten, but in reality, we do not see any practical action of the international community, when we are hoping. So I would like to request the international community to support the Gambia in the ICJ case. There is no other option than to put the pressure on Myanmar. The international justice accountability will be important to finding a long-term solution to the Rohingya crisis and dignified return to Myanmar as a permanent solution. We want to see practical action from the international community. As you know, the junta has no political willingness to accept back the Rohingya community from the Bangladesh refugee camp. Rohingya who are living inside of the Arakan state in Myanmar have no free movement, no job, no education, little access to health care. The situation now owes them as before. In Myanmar, Rohingya treated as a foreigner in their own land, deny the most basic right of the Rohingya community, which is belong. Unfortunately, international community has failed again and again. Almost a state party of Genocide Convention in 1948 have they avoid their trade obligation to prevent genocide. We have continue to see justice and accountability. We welcome the US government formal recognition of Myanmar genocide of the Rohingya. We want to see the other action from the international community like the USA, and today we see and the UK met. We are really happy and appreciate. We want to see other countries like that. And we want to see the practical action from the international community like the international community and especially European Union supporting the Ukraine-Russia aggression. We want to know more things. Until now, international community could not provide the long-term solution to the Rohingya people need. To address the need of our people, we must look the root cause crisis of the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. As you know, our top priority has always been to return home to our homeland in Myanmar. Our objective to secure a free, voluntary, dignitary repatriation to our place of origin. But we cannot return to a place where we will be forced to fail again, where we are treated as a subhuman and where it's just a matter of home before our home are burned to the ground. We cannot return to the place where we have no part of citizenship. No, we need international support and international cooperation. We need justice. We Rohingya deserve for the justice. So we hope as a genocide survivor from the largest Rohingya refugee camp, we need international support. We need solidarity more to get justice from the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. We hope we are working together. We hope we are supporting in our crisis forever. Thank you for giving time.
Thank you very much, Go Kemal, for sharing your experiences, your firsthand information, as well as your calls for the international communities and your expectations for the repatriations. Thank you for highlighting those critical issues here with us. And now I would like to invite USAID Assistant Administrator for Asia, Anne-Marie Yastishok, to share her reflection on the anniversary and the US recognition and follow-up action, especially on the area supporting refugees, rehabilitations and recovery of the victims and survivors. Acting Assistant Administrator Anne-Marie is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, who has served as an interim Deputy Missions Director for USAID Burma. Acting Assistant Administrator, in light of the US government Rohingya genocide determination, what step will USAID further take to effectively support the recovery and rehabilitations of the Rohingya community across the world?
Thank you, Weiwei, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you on this somber occasion. 5 years ago, members of Burma's military began a campaign of violence and terror, really a genocide against the Rohingya. Last night, USAID Administrator Samantha Power issued a statement condemning the genocide and those in the military who orchestrated it, the very same people responsible for overthrowing Burma's democratically elected government in 2021. Supporting the Rohingya people is one of our highest priorities. The US government is the leading donor to the humanitarian response, providing over $1.7 billion in humanitarian assistance since August of 2017 to support those affected by ongoing violence, refugees, and communities hosting refugees. In Burma, USAID provides humanitarian assistance for Rohingya and other vulnerable people in Rakhine State. We provide support for survivors of gender-based violence, safe spaces for children, mental health care, shelter rehabilitation, food assistance, hygiene supplies, access to water and sanitation, and COVID-19 prevention. In Bangladesh, USAID provides life-saving emergency food and nutrition assistance to refugees and strengthens emergency preparedness and response capacities in Cox's Bazar and Bandarband districts. These efforts support economic recovery, health, humanitarian coordination, protection, risk management, shelter and water, sanitation and hygiene or WASH interventions. We are also helping local communities in Bangladesh that host the Rohingya refugees. Our efforts strengthen agriculture and livestock services, enhance water and sanitation, counter trafficking in persons and violent extremism, and improve natural resource management. The military's decades-long control and influence in Burma helped pave the way towards this genocide. However, the brutal violence unleashed against Burma's wider civilian population after the coup opened the eyes of many to the gross human rights violations the Rohingya have suffered. Many challenges remain, and it shouldn't have taken a coup to get to this critical junction. Yet the fortitude of the Rohingya gives me hope, and all of us hope, for a brighter future and a more inclusive Burma. USAID continues building bridges and social cohesion between communities in Rakhine and other conflict-affected communities in Burma. USAID develops conflict early warning systems and strengthens local reporting mechanisms to help de-escalate potentially dangerous tensions. We've also helped create safe opportunities for different ethnic groups, including the Rohingya, to come together, discuss grievances, identify mitigation needs, and collaborate more effectively. This helps to challenge social norms and adjust local policies that often entrench separation and suspicion between communities. USAID also works to eliminate malaria in Burma, including in Rakhine. USAID provides preventive diagnostic and treatment services to reach vulnerable and conflict-affected people. All people of Burma have the right to education. This is equally true for the Rohingya. We have heard your appeals and are committed to finding new ways forward. We recently launched a new program to strengthen basic education quality, I should say, to help non-government, ethnic, and monastic providers meet community needs and serve out of school youth. And a newer higher education program is in design, which will improve access to university education opportunities for people from marginalized communities, including Rohingya. To close, today we remember those who have suffered and died in this genocide. Importantly, we take heart in the strength that is still found in Rohingya communities, including those here today, and in the international community's continued support for the Rohingya and a more democratic, inclusive Burma. We know your struggle for basic human rights, education, citizenship, and equality continues, and we will continue to support you, address systematic roots of your exclusion in Burma, and call for accountability. For decades, USAID has stood shoulder to shoulder with the people of Burma in their struggle for peace, democracy, and freedom. We remain steadfast in our commitment to the Rohingya and to helping Burma in its struggle against an oppressive military regime, and we will continue to listen, seek your guidance, provide help, and advocate for your rights. So again, I thank you for inviting us to participate this morning and really appreciate all the work that's being done by you, by the international community on addressing the rights and issues of the Rohingya, particularly on this day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Administrator, for sharing your commitment with us, and we actually hope that you and other international agencies continue to work with the community in a more victim-centric approach. So let's to move on, since we're running late. I apologize for technical errors and running behind the schedule. Now I would like to actually invite Ambassador George Sababa of the Liechtenstein to actually share his remark with us. Ambassador is the principality of the Liechtenstein to the United States of America. He also served as the Liechtenstein permanent observer to the organizations of the American state. The Liechtenstein ambassador and his country has been very, very supportive of the Rohingya and committed to end genocide and hold perpetrators accountable. They have been our strong support at the UN in Geneva and in New York. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Wai Nu, for these kind words, and thank you for inviting me to this important discussion and this Remembrance Day. This is, of course, first and foremost an occasion to honor the memory of the thousands of Rohingya victims of untold atrocities suffered at the brutal hands of the Myanmar military. But it's also the moment to honor the survivors of that violence. And to this day, they often continue to live in the most precarious of circumstances. I would also like to pay a special tribute to the brave Rohingya women, men, and children who continue to stand up for their rights against often difficult odds. To hear their voices today loud and clear is probably the most important contribution to this Remembrance Day. But today is also the time to recall how much of the suffering of the Rohingya is a result of the failure of the international community to act. The plight of the Rohingya has demonstrated in the most tragic way how a culture of impunity breeds new violence and how systematic campaigns to oppress and dehumanize a people lay the ground for most egregious atrocities. For a peaceful future of Myanmar and the Rohingya people, both dimensions need to be urgently addressed. Liechtenstein is deeply convinced that there cannot be peace without justice, nor can there be peace without an inclusive and democratic society based on the rule of law, where the fundamental rights and freedoms of all people of Myanmar are protected. And justice has a long way to go. Of course, Liechtenstein supports the existing international processes aimed at holding those to account who are responsible for the atrocities committed against the Rohingya. But these efforts are sketchy. The International Court of Justice has adopted provisional measures in its proceedings under the Genocide Convention. They require Myanmar to prevent all genocidal acts against the Rohingya, to ensure that security forces do not commit acts of genocide, and to take steps to preserve evidence related to the case. While the ICJ's decisions are legally binding in this case, the court lacks the political backing by the Security Council to help enforce its decisions. This in itself is an outrageous state of affairs. But the ICJ case also needs to be complemented by international criminal proceedings. The International Criminal Court is doing important work, but it has limited jurisdiction and is right now not in a position to make a determination of genocide. At the same time, the international community has, with overwhelming majority, called for individual criminal responsibility and has also underlined the principle of command responsibility. We are confident that the IIMM is laying a solid basis for justice by preparing case files for the most serious violations of international law. Civil society organizations also make significant contributions to that end, as do individual states such as Argentina and its case under universal jurisdiction. Yet, we cannot deny that so far we are falling short in providing a clear and comprehensive mandate for justice to make judicial determinations of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Without that, it is difficult to see how full justice can be delivered to the Rohingya people and how their voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return to a free and democratic Myanmar can be ensured. The dysfunctionality of the Security Council will prevail, so that the General Assembly of the United Nations will continue to provide the best hope for progress. The Assembly has recently given itself a new tool to keep the Security Council in check with the veto initiative. Liechtenstein stands ready to explore all options available in this regard, and we will continue to advocate for comprehensive peace and justice in Myanmar, which cannot be achieved without full judicial recognition of the crimes suffered by the Rohingya and without holding those responsible to full account. Thank you very much again for having me as part of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. You have highlighted so many important issues and points, including the responsibility of the international community to protect and to bring justice for us, for the victims and survivors. And that's the way to actually build sustainable peace, as well as highlighting the role of UN Security Council and the General Assembly coming with a more innovative tools and always to explore the innovative tools to really commit to the justice and accountability. And we thank you for your support and solidarity. Now, I would like to invite Ambassador Riaz, the Bangladesh ambassador to the Netherlands, to provide a remark on a path out of genocide and what is needed to be done to advance the justice and accountability for and for sustainable repatriations of Rohingya to Myanmar. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
I think he's not
Ambassador
here.
Riaz?
So I think he's not here. You should.
Okay. So, yeah, we will give floor to the Ambassador Riaz when he come back. Now, I would like to move on to the next agenda before we actually transition to second panel on strengthening ongoing accountability and justice. We have actually the Congressman Brett Sherman of the United States kindly sent us a video recorded remark, and I would like to share with you all. Let me see, how do I do this? Thank you. I'll be sharing screen. Not yet. Just give me 1 second. Oops. Oops, not this one, sorry. Oh. Okay, I think we will move on to next agenda. We will turn on the video, play the video once we come back from the next panel discussion. So now I would like to invite Andrea Gettleman from the Holocaust Memorial Museum Center for the Prevention of Genocide, and a long-term partner and supporter of the the cause of Rohingya and genocide around the world. Andrea, over to you. Please lead us this discussion.
Thank you, Weiwei, and your team for organizing this powerful event today. And thank you to all the other participants for joining. I'm Andrea Gettleman. I'm with the Simon Scott Center for the Prevention of Genocide at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. The 5 years since the height of the genocide against the Rohingya has been a period of anguish, as we've heard, for Rohingya families who lost loved ones, for people who have lost their homes, and those who face a risky and uncertain future today. It has been a time for the world to reckon with its failure, yet again, to prevent genocide. But as we've also seen, there are some bright spots. There are the Rohingya leaders, including those who brought us together today, and other civil society actors who are fighting for justice and for a peaceful future for Rohingya in Burma. And there are the speakers joining us now who are all advancing meaningful efforts to promote justice and accountability for the genocide against the Rohingya. We will begin with remarks from Ambassador Beth Van Schaack, Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice at the U.S. Department of State. Following her remarks, I will introduce our panel of experts who are all leading the fight against impunity. I now turn it over to Ambassador Van Schaack. Ambassador, I believe you're still muted. So if you can unmute and perhaps start again.
Apologies, we're all struggling with technology today. Just a quick remark to begin to thank you for inviting me to join you today as part of this important event to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the horrific 2017 campaign against Rohingya, during which members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity against this community. I'm humbled and I'm deeply honored to be asked to be part of the Remembrance Day organizing committee composed of Rohingya experts and community leaders, and to say just a few words as part of this event. I'm also very sorry that my colleague, Derek Chalet, the Secretary's counselor, was unable to join today due to technical difficulties. He will record his remarks and make them available to everyone convened here. So as mentioned, I'm Bess Van Schok, and I'm the Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice. My office and the mission of my office is to advise the US government and to engage in international diplomacy and programming to help prevent, mitigate, and respond and redress atrocities through processes of justice and accountability. On this solemn anniversary, I want to reiterate that the US government stands in solidarity with the Rohingya community. The violence and discrimination longstanding against members of the Rohingya community is horrendous and should never have happened. Moreover, we are keenly aware that Rohingya are still suffering now, both inside and outside of Burma. The United States continues to commit ourselves every day to standing by your side as your ally and partner as we work together to find the path out of genocide. And on that note, as today's commemoration is aptly entitled, A Path Out of Genocide, Actions for Accountability and Justice, Secretary Blinken said this too during his March 21 speech this year at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. At that time, he made public our determination that the members of the Burmese military have committed genocide and crimes against humanity against Rohingya, and noted, quote, "Of course, the path out of genocide runs through justice." Me, my team, and our partners throughout the US government are taking this very seriously, and we're working diligently to help support a path forward that will advance justice and accountability for these atrocities. We can and we must take steps to empower Rohingya voices and Rohingya leadership and work alongside the Rohingya community in this regard. In this respect, we need to work to help heal those who have suffered, to support processes to investigate, prosecute, and punish those who are responsible, and to take actions to prevent this from ever happening again. The US government is committed to all of these endeavors, and this is a government-wide commitment. While there are a range of actions that we are taking in this regard, I want to focus on a few that address the core of actions for justice and accountability. So first, we have taken steps to support the historic case that the Gambia has brought against Myanmar in the International Court of Justice, arguing that Burma has violated its obligations under the Genocide Convention in relation to Rohingya. At the request of the Gambian government, we have shared relevant information in our possession with the Gambia to help strengthen its case. Second, we are providing support to the UN's independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar, which has a mandate to collect, consolidate, preserve, and analyze evidence of the most serious crimes of international concern committed in Burma since 2011. It also has a mandate to prepare files in order to facilitate fair and independent criminal proceedings in national, regional, or international courts or tribunals that may now or in the future have jurisdiction over these crimes. This support to the IIMM includes providing it with funding to strengthen its capacity to achieve its mandate, sharing relevant information with it, meeting regularly with its principals, as we did this week, and providing significant diplomatic support in order to facilitate its work. Third, the United States is working with international partners and non-governmental organizations to offer support to brave Rohingya seeking justice in the courts of Argentina for the atrocities committed against them. The exercise of universal jurisdiction in other courts around the world offers another potential pathway for justice for Rohingya. Fourth, we are working with the Rohingya community to help document the atrocities and abuse that have been committed against them, and we stand ready to support a holistic transitional justice process to address the long history of atrocities and abuses against Rohingya when that process becomes viable. This must respect the demands of victims for truth, reparation, justice, and promises of non-recurrence. And finally, I would like to call attention to Secretary Blinken's statement earlier today, in which he made clear that the United States, and I quote, supports measures by the UN Security Council to promote justice and accountability for the military's action in line with the Council's mandate to promote international peace and security. And in this vein, he announced that we would support a UN Security Council referral of the situation in Burma to the International Criminal Court. Such a referral would allow the ICC to address all atrocity crimes committed against Rohingya, as well as crimes committed against others in Burma since 2002, including in connection with the crackdowns following the 2021 military coup. Now, of course, the United States does not make decisions for the UN Security Council. We need to consult with other members of the Council, and we are continuously discussing the best way forward to help address the situation in Burma with other Council members. We are open to all available options to help ensure there is justice and accountability for these atrocities. At the end of the day, we think it's important to be clear about the United States' position on the need for accountability for victims of the Burmese military's atrocities. Now, we recognize that justice must still feel like a very long way off, and I want to be honest in acknowledging that myself. And as we know from looking at other case studies and throughout history, that justice for these types of atrocities can take decades. It does not happen on its own, however. It is the result of years of work, tireless work by victims, survivors, advocates and their allies, states, and non-governmental organizations, all laying the foundation year after year for justice. So today, as we gather at this event to commemorate 5 years since the 2017 campaign, during which members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity against Rohingya, it bears repeating what Secretary Blinken said, that the United States reaffirms its broad commitment to accompany Rohingya on this path out of genocide, towards truth, towards accountability, towards a home that will welcome them as equal members, and that will respect their rights and dignity, alongside that of all the people of Burma. Thank you again for including me today, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those remarks and for all that you and your team have done to support justice and accountability for the Rohingya. It is now my pleasure to introduce our expert panel. We are joined today by Christopher Santora, who's a senior legal officer with the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, a mechanism mandated to collect, preserve, and analyze evidence of the most serious international crimes in Myanmar since 2011. We're also joined by Arsalan Suleiman, counsel at Foley Hoag and representing the Gambia in its case against Myanmar at the International Court of Justice. We also are joined by Tamosohe Quintana, former UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, and an attorney representing Rohingya in a case in Argentina. As a brief reminder, after each of the speakers give their remarks, we will have a few minutes for questions from the audience. You can submit questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Santora for brief remarks.
Thank you, Andrea. And I will be brief because I understand we're a little bit behind on time. So first of all, my name is Christopher Santora. I'm a senior legal officer at the IIMM and leading the team that is looking into the Rohingya situation and the crimes committed against the Rohingya population. Ambassador Benchek gave a very eloquent explanation as to what we actually do, and I'll just take it a little further than that, in that what we really are designed to do is to make sure that the evidence is collected, preserved, analyzed now, before it's too late. As many criminal practitioners know, evidence does not age well necessarily, and the more quickly you collect it and analyze it and prepare these cases, the more likelihood of success. Obviously, we're here because it's been 5 years since the events of 2017, but the events of 2017 did not happen in a vacuum, and there are people that have been affected way before that time period as well, and we are looking at that as well in terms of holding the perpetrators responsible. The notions of justice and accountability, which we'll hear a lot today, are obviously critical, and this is why we're here. But I think, frankly, the feeling I've had, and in terms of working with members of the Rohingya community, the feeling right now, frankly, is anger. It's frustration. And it is understandable because not only has it been a long time, but the perpetrators are still in power often. And events like the coup happened because there was not accountability, there was not justice. So the level of frustration is understandably very, very high. And it makes me personally angry that the perpetrators have not faced justice yet. As Ambassador also said, it's a long process, but there has to actually be progress along the way. There's a reason why they call it crimes against humanity, because it is crimes against all of us. It's not simply confined to a particular group. This is the crimes that occurred are against humanity as we know it. And this is why it should make every one of us very angry that the situation is still what it is. There was some comments before, and I'll just talk specifically about some of the issues about what the international community as a whole can do to facilitate and help this process. And one of the biggest things that probably could be done that should be more focused on, frankly, is in terms of creating case files, in terms of seeing trials actually happen, there needs to be witness protection. There needs to be for the ability for the witnesses themselves to actually be able to give testimony. And that requires often the work of governments to assist in this process. People are putting themselves at great risk to come forward sometime in some situations. And there needs to be, there is no international witness protection program out there. Maybe there should be, but there's not right now. And so this aspect of creating cases is one of the ones that I think as a practitioner, I see over and over again as a problem. And witness protection as a whole is critical to building cases. The other comment, I saw a comment that I don't know if it was addressed, there was concern, obviously the situation in Ukraine is taking a lot of publicity now, but I want to also emphasize that this is possibly an opportunity. And the reason I say that is because the mechanism, the places where accountability can occur are not just the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, which we as the IIMM are supporting and working with, but also in national jurisdictions. And the fact that there's this situation in Ukraine will actually invigorate domestic processes of justice as well, which will have a residual effect and benefit eventually as well for Burmese cases that eventually come up. Our objective is to make sure that we gather the best evidence, that it's the most objective case, most objective evidence possible, and we share that. And we share that with jurisdictions. And then at some point, whether it's now, tomorrow, 3, 5, 10 years from now, the perpetrators are not going to be able to sleep comfortably because you know what? There's a possibility that at some point, somewhere, they will face an arrest. That is really what we hope to achieve, that these cases are constructed now, that these files are built now. And yes, if we can see accountability tomorrow, I would love to see it. But we also want to ensure that that those who did this are not able to just, that everyone will forget about this and we can go home and sleep comfortably. We want to make sure that doesn't happen, that they'll always be worried that they'll potentially face an arrest. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over because I know we are running out of time and there's a lot of issues here, but I want to thank Weiwei and the organization for inviting me to speak.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, we'll turn it over now to Mr. Suleiman.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you to Weiwei and all of the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very solemn and somber occasion. It is an honor to be here with all of you and to collectively remember and honor the victims of the genocide and those who remain in the refugee camps and IDP camps and maintain the scars that they have from the horrific acts of violence and genocide that occurred during the clearance operations, but also the long-standing manifestations of the genocidal acts and genocidal policies of Myanmar that have not simply happened 5 years ago, but have been part of an ongoing decades-long process of dehumanization and genocide against the Rohingya population. It has been certainly an honor for me and my colleagues who are part of the team representing the Gambia before the International Court of Justice in order to hold Myanmar accountable to its obligations under the Genocide Convention for the Rohingya genocide. In terms of justice mechanisms, the International Court of Justice mechanism that the Gambia has employed is really the only mechanism that can accomplish state responsibility or state accountability for the crimes committed by the state of Myanmar. We certainly support and recognize the critical importance of the criminal accountability mechanisms that are employed through institutions and tribunals like the ICC and national jurisdictions like universal jurisdiction cases like the one that's ongoing in Argentina. But we also deeply appreciate all the support and attention that the case before the ICJ has received, because this is a vital opportunity to hold Myanmar as a state responsible and accountable for the crimes that it has committed and is committing against the Rohingya population. And so we're deeply appreciative of course, the Gambia for taking the lead and bringing this case and doing the hard work in actually bringing the case to the court itself. I know all of you are following the developments closely, so you know already that last month the court issued a very strong judgment in the Gambia's favor, rejecting all of Myanmar's objections to the court's jurisdiction, which means that we are now firmly in the merits phase of the case. And we are now awaiting Myanmar's counter memorial, which will be their written pleading that responds to the Gambia's memorial, which was filed all the way back in October of 2020. And we're really grateful for all of the institutions and organizations and individuals and victims who've helped us as part of that evidence gathering and submission process. We have testimony from victims as part of that. We have reports from the United Nations, from the fact-finding mission as part of that. We have information that we've been receiving from various sources as part of that. And so we're grateful for everyone who's been supporting that process. We continue to gather evidence that we hope to use in order to prove the Gambia's case that genocide did indeed occur and that Myanmar as a state is responsible. And we're looking forward to the day that we have that open hearing at The Hague, where Myanmar will have to defend itself from these substantive charges of genocide. And we are very hopeful and confident that the Gambia will prevail in that case and that justice will be done. I know for the victims that it has been a long road and still is a long road for many of these processes, including the ICJ process. It's been our intention to push things as fast as possible and to move the case along as quickly as possible, because we also believe that justice delayed is justice denied. And so, again, I thank you for your support and your cooperation and collaboration in making this initiative, the Gambia's case, hopefully the success that it will be and the role that it will play in helping to ensure justice and accountability. I just want to make one more comment before I turn it back over to Andrea, which is that one of the panelists in the earlier session said something to the effect that ICJ judgments are not binding. That's not true. The judgments and orders of the International Court of Justice are binding. They are binding under international law, and they are binding on Myanmar. The question of enforcement may be a separate issue, but that does not mean that these judgments and rulings are not binding. Indeed, they are. They constitute direct obligations under international law for Myanmar. And if those obligations and orders and judgments are violated, they do constitute violations that the court can acknowledge and rule upon in its ultimate judgment on the merits. And we do call upon the international community to help to enforce these obligations that are on Myanmar, both under international law more generally, including under the Genocide Convention, but also in the context of this specific case, because although the judgments and rulings are binding, the way of ensuring enforcement is necessarily, and part of the UN system, is a collective effort. It's a collective effort on the part of all states to ensure that other nation states, who are all of whom are sovereign, do abide by their obligations under international law. So with that, thank you again to the organizers and to everyone who's tuning in. I'll turn it back over to Andrea.
Thank you, Arslan, for those remarks and for your work on that important case. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Quintana.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Weiwei, and all the organizers of this important event. 5 years ago, on the 5th of August, the clearance operation started in Rakhine State. And basically, the genocide against the Rohingya was at that point completed. And I wanted to just remind all of us very basic lines of the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. What happened in Rakhine State basically was that there were acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, whether in times of peace or war. And there are, we all know, a number of acts, atrocities committed to basically destroy in whole or in part this group, and killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. All these and many other acts were committed 5 years ago on a day like this. We should remember this event is incredibly important. This clearance operation shouldn't happen. The international community and the United Nations had all the alarms sounding about what could happen in Rakhine State. And we should remember this shouldn't have happened against the Rohingya. This destruction of part of the community, which at the same time is still ongoing. When I visited Rakhine State as a reporter back in 2012-13, visiting Mutidong Township, Mongdo Township, going to the prisons, the Rohingyas were really frightened, terrorized by the Tatmadaw in Rakhine State. And all the alarms sounded about what could happen in that part of the country against the Rohingya. Now, the Rohingya community are taking the voice about the need for justice, the need for reparation, the need to stop the ongoing genocide in Rakhine State. And that's very important. It is the voices, the Rohingyas themselves who have been empowered after the atrocities to basically lead the process towards justice, towards having the chance to go back to their territory. And that's incredibly important. Let me tell you that in the case of the Argentina universal jurisdiction case, this criminal complaint was filed by Rohingya leaders, Rohingya people. And that has to be said, has to be recognized. It is the Rohingya community who are leading this case in Argentina. It is Rohingyas in the diaspora, but also Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar who are taking the lead, who are requesting the judges in Argentina for justice. It is themselves who are basically running the case in Argentina, and that's very important and needs to be highlighted because the Rohingya community has been basically silent for many, many decades, many, many years, especially in Myanmar, in Rakhine State. The truth about the genocide cannot be contested anymore at the international level. That's critical. It's very important. And we should re-emphasize that. The truth of what happened has been proven, especially by the United Nations Fact-Finding Commission. And that's very important. And we need to, again, remind everybody, especially those who are now the junta in Myanmar, we need to remind them that the truth cannot be changed. The Rohingya has been subject to genocide, and that's the truth. It has been written in the history. And it has now it's been discussed at the ICJ as well. The memorialization, this event where we are trying to bring to our memories, to the memories of everyone, to the international community, to the Rohingya community, all members of the Rohingya community, memorializing what happened to their community, it's critically important. And that's why I welcome this important event. And now we are all trying to seek justice, trying to break this cycle of impunity that governed Myanmar for decades, in this case, especially against the Rohingya. It's no revenge. Rohingyas are not looking for revenge. What they want is justice. They want the perpetrators to be brought to a court of law and to respond for what they have done. This is individual criminal responsibility. And here we are not just pointing to the direct perpetrators, those who committed the atrocities on the ground in each of the villages in Rakhine State. We are targeting those who ordered, planned, and executed the genocide. And in this case, the head of the operation was Min Aung Hlaing, and he should know that if you commit this kind of the worst crime, international crime of genocide, you will be held to account and you will have to respond about it. I will leave here the floor and thank for the support of all of those organizations here. We have the AAM has been quite supportive to our case in Argentina. We are looking for further engagement with AAM. We need to access to more information. We need to access to the list of perpetrators that the Commission of Inquiry, Fact-Finding Commission of Myanmar included in their report. We need information to move forward the case in Argentina. The court here in Argentina is expecting to receive evidence to then make the proper decisions towards accountability. We also welcomed the support of the US Department of State, that they recognize that the case in Argentina, it is very important. We really applaud the initiative of Arslan and the Gambia in their efforts at the ICJ. It's critically important. We are looking closely what's happening with that case, and also we support and we thank the support of the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC, who has also been in contact with the Rohingyas leading this case, been supportive, and we understand that this is all concerted efforts. We are expecting to have to move fast in the case in Argentina. The Rohingyas don't want to wait 10 years for justice. And the instruments, the legal instruments are there. What is required is political will from different partners. So I will end there. Thank you very much, Andrea, and especially YY.
Thank you for those remarks. And I think for reminding us that often these formal accountability mechanisms are designed to center the experiences of victims and survivors. And thank you for reminding us of the importance of who is leading those efforts and who is in charge, and knowing that there are so many people who are with us today who have been at the fore of that fight. We are short on time, so we just had a brief question, and any of the three panelists are welcome to answer. Some of you have touched on how states, how governments have been supporting these various accountability efforts. Is there something in addition that you would like to see? Is it support for witness protection? Is it formal interventions in the ICJ case? Are there specific things that you would like to see being done in addition to what has already been announced? And any panelist can respond.
I would just, because I could quickly just add one thing, because I mentioned the issue of witness protection. And as Thomas Quintana mentioned, the efforts here are not just about those that pulled the trigger or burned the villages, but it's their bosses and their bosses' bosses. And having been in this field for a little too long, I know that building cases like this requires a firsthand account, not just, of course, at the crime-based level, so to speak, but within the organizational structure. And so it's not usually as simple as a commander saying, go out and commit war crimes. Here's your order. It's not usually that simple. It's usually, it takes quite a lot to build a case against leadership. And that requires usually witnesses or quote unquote insiders that have a view to certain things and how they were done. Thomas also mentioned, of course, this didn't start in 2017. This was going on. There were warning signs for a long, long time. In Rwanda, they had the radio. In Burma, they had social media. And anybody who read social media would have been extremely alarmed prior to these events in 2017. And so building these cases against leadership, probably the biggest thing for states in terms of is this issue of witness protection. This issue to make sure that witnesses, the assistants, to make sure that they can move, that they have documentation, that they can actually participate in proceedings. And a lot of that's very logistical and very cumbersome and very bureaucratic, but it's absolutely necessary for these cases to succeed.
I just wanted to also thank the UK government. The UK government has been also helping our work here in Argentina. It's very important. Similarly to what's happening with the Gambia case, where we are seeing more states coming on board. It's very important that the case in Argentina is receiving this kind of support from states.
And I'd just like to add, Andrea, for the perspective of the Gambia team in the ICJ case, we certainly welcome the statements of support from states in terms of that case. We absolutely welcome constructive interventions by states, and we welcome the UK's stated intention to intervene, as well as that of Canada and the Netherlands. For any state that's seeking to intervene, we just advise that they coordinate very closely with the Gambia directly and with the legal teams so that these interventions are constructive and help to ensure a successful result in the case overall. But there are other ways as well that states can help in the overall justice-seeking process. Part of that includes building international pressure on Myanmar to comply with its international obligations, not to commit genocide, not to commit crimes against humanity, etc. So that includes efforts to coordinate sanctions and other coercive measures, which are certainly important. That also includes something that Special Rapporteur Tom Andrews mentioned, which is affirmative statements recognizing the genocide. So determinations like the United States did in terms of recognizing the genocide, I think, are also important in building this international pressure and consensus around what Tomas rightly said is the reality and established fact that the genocide did occur. So all of these are helpful, and I think we look forward to seeing more and more states join the ranks of those who have done so and who support these types of mechanisms.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you for all the panelists, especially for staying on for these questions. I really appreciate the discussion that we've had so far. The pursuit of justice is one important part of moving on, properly remembering and setting a historical record. And so glad to have this element as part of the discussion and of the remembrance ceremony today. Wei Wei, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for moderating these sessions, and thank you our speakers for highlighting challenges and opportunities around the ongoing justice processes, and also bringing up your thoughts on how to collaborate between and among these mechanisms and initiatives. I appreciate you for joining our program, and thank you again. And now I would like to introduce our next distinguished speakers and begin with the Councillor Sholay of the United States Department, who has sent us actually a video recording of his remark. And thank you, Ambassador Shaq, for kindly introducing his attendance earlier. And Councillor Sholay serves at the rank of the Undersecretary as a Senior Policy Advisor to the Secretary of State on a wide range of the issues and conduct special diplomatic assignment as directed by the Secretary. I'll now play the video of the Councillor Sholay.
I'm honored to be here today. I want to thank the Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Days Committee for organizing this event to remember the victims and all those impacted by this horrific tragedy. Today is an opportunity to reassert our shared commitment to supporting the Rohingya and all other ethnic and religious communities across Burma. We must never forget what happened 5 years ago. The Burmese military killed thousands of Rohingya men, women, and children, and forced over 740,000 innocent people to flee their homes and seek refuge in Bangladesh. This was one of the largest mass exoduses in recent history. Last March, Secretary of State Blinken announced that the United States has determined the military's atrocities against the Rohingya constituted genocide and crimes against humanity. This underscored our commitment to Rohingya and all the people of Burma and their aspirations for justice, accountability, and respect for human rights and dignity. But the horrors inside Burma continue. 18 months after overthrowing the democratically elected government, many of the same members of the military who perpetuated genocide and crimes against humanity against the Rohingya continue to unleash a violent crackdown against the people of Burma writ large. The military regime has remained unrelenting in its violence, having killed well over 2,000 people and displaced hundreds of thousands more. These conditions have exacerbated the humanitarian crisis for the country's most vulnerable communities. We must redouble our efforts to help the victims of these abuses and the more than 1 million refugees who have been forced to seek refuge elsewhere. The United States will do its part to assist those that have been most impacted by the crisis in Burma, Bangladesh, and elsewhere in the region. We have provided more than $1.7 billion in humanitarian aid, remaining the single largest donor to the humanitarian response to the Rohingya crisis. We also stand in solidarity with Bangladesh and other countries in the region hosting Rohingya refugees. We remain focused on creating the conditions for the voluntary, safe, dignified. I'm honored to be here today, focused on creating the conditions for the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of Rohingya. We have also increased resettlement of some from the region, including Bangladesh, so they could pursue their livelihoods here in the United States. And we are working closely with international partners to enhance the delivery of aid to Rohingya who remain in Rakhine State. We have also continued to advance measures to promote justice and accountability for the military's abuses. This includes visa restrictions or financial sanctions on top military leaders and units, many of which were involved in human rights abuses against Rohingya and the suppression of people protests after the February 1st, 2021 coup. The United States has heightened scrutiny of the military's actions by supporting the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar, the case under the Genocide Convention that the Gambia has brought against Burma before the International Court of Justice, and credible courts around the world that have jurisdiction cases involving the Burmese military's atrocities. These efforts are crucial to hold the regime to account and deny it global credibility, ensuring it accounts for its heinous atrocities against Rohingya and others in Burma. In looking ahead, we must continue to work together to empower all those working peacefully to restore Burma's path to multi-party democracy and ensure Rohingya and other ethnic and religious minority communities have a say in its shared vision. This includes encouraging the National Unity Government and other pro-democracy groups to meaningfully include Rohingya in discussing a future democratic and inclusive Burma. Above all, we must not lose hope in our collective ability to overcome the immense challenges facing the country, while also recognizing the international community must do more to protect and support Rohingya and all others suffering at the hands of the military's unconscionable brutality and tyranny. Rohingya and the broader population of Burma deserve our full support to ensure that future generations can enjoy the fruits of peace and democracy. Thank you again for letting me have a few minutes with you today for this very, very important conference. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sholay, for providing us with with very strong commitment, statement of commitment, as well as making this very critical announcement with us, including the issues around repatriations and resettlement, as well as accountability. Thank you again for joining our program and sending us with that video recording. And now, actually, in earlier program sessions, we were not able to show the Congressman Brett Sherman's remark, and I would now like to take opportunity to share his remarks as well, as he kindly shares his remarks and shows solidarity with us.
Sherman Oaks. I've served for 26 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, where I am the second ranking Democrat. I'm honored to join YY and the Rohingya community in recognizing the horrific genocide of the Rohingya people at the hands of the Myanmar military. As we come together to remember the atrocities committed in Myanmar, also known as Burma, over the many years by the military and against the Rohingya people, I stand with you to say that the fight to end the coup and to recognize full citizenship and repatriation rights for the Rohingya people, that battle is not over. It was only in March of this year that the US State Department finally acknowledged what we have sought recognition for quite some time. And that is that the atrocities committed against the Rohingya people by the military of Burma or Myanmar constitute genocide. The community has been making that argument for many years, and I've worked toward that goal in my role in Congress, where I've co-sponsored or sponsored no fewer than 10 congressional resolutions directing efforts to protect the democracy and human rights of the people of Burma and the refugees in Bangladesh, and imposing sanctions on those committing crimes against humanity and calling for the recognition of minority rights, particularly the rights of the Rohingya people in Rakhine State, and those hundreds of thousands who have been displaced by the war and by persecution. The declaration of genocide is an important step to addressing the injustices faced by the people of Myanmar, and particularly the Rohingya people. But much more work needs to be done. According to the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, there are nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees and asylum seekers in neighboring countries, and thousands more Rohingya remain, hundreds of thousands of more Rohingya remain in Rakhine State under the threat of the Myanmar military. Further, the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh are facing increasing food insecurity as global food prices rise due to Putin's war against Ukraine. This must end. The illegal coup must be reversed. The people of Myanmar deserve free, fair, and transparent and inclusive elections. But it's not enough that the junta alone has persecuted the Rohingya people. That persecution began before this recent coup. Myanmar's 1982 citizenship law is an odious piece of legislation designed to exclude the Rohingya from being considered citizens. The US Congress recognizes that democracy takes hard work and it must be continually exercised and defended. And that requires the inclusion of all the people of a country. It requires freedom, justice, and equality. While the National Unity Government announcement last year to end, or taking the position that it would end, the 1982 citizenship law. That's a good first step. But the NUG must positively state that the Rohingya people are not only allowed to return to their native lands, but are to be granted full citizenship documents, and that must be enshrined by law and recognized by the government of Myanmar. On this Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day, I join you in honoring those who have been killed, abducted, or disappeared by the junta, and those who continue to suffer as refugees and displaced persons. We must recommit to work to an end to the war in Myanmar, the release of political prisoners, and the safe return of the Rohingya people. Equally important, we must look to the future of Myanmar as a free, democratic, and inclusive country that recognizes the importance of all of its people and citizens, including the Rohingya. Thank you, and I wish you the best. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman.
Thank you very much, Congressman Brad Sherman, for your consistent support and solidarity with us. Before going to our last speaker to provide a closing remark, I would like to take this opportunity to actually deliver a message from the Rohingya community. This program, this event is part of the event that we, Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day Committee, organizing part of the three programs, one Rohingya program and two Burmese program, and this is the last program in English language. So over the past several weeks and within these programs, we try to talk to the Rohingya communities on the ground in Myanmar, in Bangladesh as much as possible, and we try to collect their voices through our discussions. And now I would like to present you to summarize those by summarizing those calls in different things, and I'll allow me to actually deliver a very short statement from the Rohingya community on behalf of the Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day Organizing Committee. So I'm just going to read again. I begin. On this year's Genocide Remembrance Day, we, the Rohingya community, commemorate the attacks of genocide against us 5 years ago, mourn the lives that we taken from us then, and the pain and suffering to which we have been subjected for decades. Yet, this August 25, we choose to remind ourselves that we are more than just victims and survivors of genocide. We are resilient agents of our own future. The challenges that we have overcome together give us the strength to survive. Today, our unity fuels our call for action. Address the root cause of the genocide and support our path out of it. One, we call upon more countries to recognize our genocide and hold its perpetrators, the Burmese military, accountable. Two, we urge government and international organization to provide sustainable financial, material, political assistance to our community. Three, we invite the Burmese civilian leaderships to meaningfully engage with us for our citizenship, ethnic nationality rights, and ethnic rights to be restored. We remind all parties, both international and Burmese, to actively include and consult with us in any discussions or mechanisms related to our collective future. All we want is our safe, dignified, voluntary return home to Burma, our justice, and our freedom. Now, I would like to introduce our closing speaker, the Gambia Solicitor General, Hussein Tomasi. Until his appointment as the Solicitor General, Tomasi was an advisor to the Ministry of Justice. As many of you may know, the Ministry of Justice has done tremendous work for bringing justice to the Rohingya community. We truly grateful for the leadership of the country, the country has taken. The Solicitor General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam YY, for your excellent moderation this afternoon. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me begin first by expressing my thanks and appreciation to the Rohingya Genocide Remembrance Day Organizing Committee for inviting me to participate in this very important event under the theme, a part out of the genocide, actions for accountability and justice. The topic is indeed very dear to us, all Gambians, given our role in this, in the case of the Rohingyas before the International Court of Justice. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me also take this opportunity to congratulate all the speakers at today's forum for your dedication and commitment to ensuring justice for the Rohingya and an end to the genocide. Atrocities and other forms of rights violations were committed, as we all know, during the Second World War, which made the civilized international community come out with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. And the declaration, as we know, seeks to recognize the rights of all individuals, talking about all individuals being born free and equal in dignity and rights, and endowed with reason and conscience, and should act to one another in a spirit of brotherhood. We are all human beings, equal before the eyes of God and equal before the eyes of under the law and under international law. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide was adopted after the Second World War in December 1948, and it came into force in January 1951. The convention by and large expresses the international community's commitment to never again, after the atrocities committed during the Second World War. But what did the world witness after the Second World War? 43 years after the entry into force of the Genocide Convention, the Rwandan genocide was witnessed. Shortly after, we saw the Bosnia genocide. 25 years later, after these brutal acts, we are today witnessing the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar and the persecution of other races. What is happening in Rohingya? What is happening to the Rohingya in Myanmar is genocide of the Rohingya, pure and simple. The Rohingya, as highlighted here, have suffered mass killings, mass rape, killing and burning of children in their homes and places of worship, destruction of their homes and properties, all in an attempt to exterminate them. To exterminate them simply because they were born to a different race and different religion. Our primary motivation as a country in bringing before the International Court of Justice this case is premised on the fact that the world cannot continue to be indifferent to the sufferings of the Rohingya. 2 decades of our own brutal dictatorship has taught us that we must use our moral voice to condemn oppression and stand for justice and human rights whenever and wherever there is injustice and massive violations of human rights and abuses. Excuse me. On 11 November 2019, the Gambia filed its case against Myanmar and the International Court of Justice, accusing Myanmar of genocide against its Rohingya Muslim minority in the case of application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Incidentally, both the Gambia and Myanmar are signatories to the 1948 Genocide Convention, which compels all members to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. You will recall, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, that on the 23rd of January 2020, a unanimous decision by the International Court of Justice in The Hague ordering provisional measures to prevent further acts of genocide from occurring in Myanmar was made by the court. The court's decision was historic and celebrated throughout the world. The court unanimously ordered Myanmar and all its entities to prevent the commission of all acts of genocide against the Rohingya, including killings, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm, including infliction of conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction, and measures to prevent births. In the same vein, the court ordered Myanmar to preserve all evidence as well as furnishing reports on a 6-monthly basis to the court in compliance. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is important to note that what the International Court has done is to provide a mechanism to serve as a check on Myanmar before the completion of the case. The case has now been brought under the purview of international law. The court's notification of its order of provisional measures to the United Nations Security Council pursuant to Article 41(2) of the court statute was also done. The UN Security Council, as a matter of fact, is now expected to fulfill its role in ensuring compliance with the court's order by Myanmar. The Gambia's action has also ensured that the case against the Rohingya is no longer relegated to non-binding resolutions and meetings that have no substantial impact on the plight of the Rohingya. Since the filing of this case, Canada and the Netherlands have expressed interest and have now partnered and joined in the case to ensure justice for the Rohingya. We welcome the announcement by Britain, by the United Kingdom today, to also make an intervention in the case, as well as imposing another round of sanctions on the military junta. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on the 22nd July this year, the Gambia welcomed the decision by the International Court of Justice, which ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Gambia again in the case against Myanmar for the Rohingya genocide. The court rejected all 4 of Myanmar's preliminary objections to the court's jurisdiction and affirmed the Gambia as a state party to the Genocide Convention to hold Myanmar to account to its obligations under the convention not to commit genocide. As at now, we look forward to the merits phase of the case, where the court will have to decide whether acts of genocide occurred and if Myanmar is responsible for those crimes. However, it must be reiterated here that if we are to ensure a safe return of the Rohingya to Myanmar, the Constitution of Myanmar has to be acknowledged and has to acknowledge and recognize the Rohingya as an ethnic group as a starting point. The exclusion from the approved 135 list of ethnic groups is still ongoing. If you are identified as an illegal immigrant, obviously there are serious problems and consequences if you are to return back to your homeland. We must therefore work on a total legal reform in Myanmar as a condition precedent for the return of the Rohingyas. It is significant at this point to recognize and acknowledge the magnanimous humanitarian effort of the government of Bangladesh in its open door policy in receiving and providing shelter for the Rohingya refugees who are fleeing from the barbaric and atrocious crimes committed from Myanmar. The massive influx is not without its heavy toll on Bangladesh and its population, who have to endure severe socio-economic, environmental, and security challenges. We therefore call in the international community, in particular the OIC members, to increase assistance to Bangladesh for this noble cause. In the same vein, we call on the international community to increase its assistance to ensure that the plight of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh is eased. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to seize this opportunity before I conclude to thank the law firm of Foley Hogg. I can see Mr. Arsalan here present for the excellent work that they are doing in ensuring justice for the Rohingya through Gambia's initiative. It is also important to highlight here that the Gambia needs support. The Gambia needs support, strong support from all OIC members so it can continue its prosecution of this case. And we must all recognize that this case has a very important impact in ensuring justice and accountability for the Rohingyas. It is therefore imperative on the OIC, which has actually been supporting Gambia and has been actually at the background, to actually continue to intensify its support to the Gambia so that the Gambia can successfully prosecute its case before the International Court of Justice. With these remarks, I would once again want to thank all the speakers today for their commitment to the cause of the Rohingya and in ensuring justice and accountability for the genocide in Myanmar. I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Solicitor General, for your remark. We once again express our gratitude for you and the Ministry of Justice for acting on your solidarity with the Rohingya community. So today we have heard so much and learned more about the situations of Rohingya, how international responses to the genocide can be strengthened, and how ongoing justice mechanism can be fortified. I thank the distinguished speakers for your powerful remarks, as well as moderators and my fellow organizers for facilitating this event. We particularly welcome hearing more about the UK's government's intervention in the ICJ case and the US government support for Burma ICC referral, as well as universal jurisdiction case in Argentina. Indeed, accountability should be at the forefront of all actions related to Burma. And as our event has highlighted, it is essential for the international community to do more to help bring Rohingya towards their path for recovery and rehabilitation. Ma Sheikhu Farah, Go Rokemau, and Yasmin Ullah powerfully echoed what our community has been calling for decades. I hope you will continue to put our voices and concern at the center of your effort. Finally, on behalf of the organizing committee, I thank you to those who are watching online, and I appreciate you all here in the webinar for staying until the end of the program. I once again thank our esteemed speakers, guests, and moderators again for creating these conversations very meaningful and for standing with the persecuted. I wish you all the best and goodbye for now.